Welcome back everybody. Today we're doing a tutorial slash experimenting to get this beveled 3D puff effect. Not sure if that's what it's actually called, but it's pretty much where you do 3D puff in a way that your 3D puff has an angle to it, kind of like a ramp. We'll see in just a second, but this is pretty much what you need. As always, I'm using my Tajima, but if your machine can run 3D puff foam, you should be fine. And on top of that, only other thing is the actual foam. I did run some samples off screen just to make sure it was possible to get this effect and not be fumbling around. And we'll probably be going back and forth between the digitizing and going over our samples. Now this was the first sample I ever did just to see if it was even possible the way that I seen or thought this effect to be done. You probably cannot see it much. It's very small. Probably could see it less through the camera, but that's what we're doing today. We're gonna make this effect pop. In short, what you need to do to get this is lay down a 3D puff satin underneath. So in this case, it was right here on this edge, smaller than what your lettering is gonna cover on top. The marker just spread everywhere. But our thin 3D border is sitting inside on the right side of the satin, and then the satin starts close to the puff and extends further out away from the puff, going like this. So when it's done, this side of the satin is more lifted than the left side because there is no puff underneath on the left side. As you can tell, that first stitch out and sample and just trying it out is far from what it should look like, what we're trying to accomplish today. So that's the mission. So after that, I ditched that font and then I used a different font that was a little bit wider, and it definitely helped. Here's one of them, and here's the other. Now the red one has the same idea that I was talking about, putting the 3D puff off to one side of the lettering satin, and this one was one that I put 2 layers of puff, and I had another issue that I don't want to repeat, or that I might actually repeat, but we're gonna have to make some tweaks on it. So let's jump into the digitizing for these two, and we'll go ahead and probably run 1 or 2 more samples. Hopefully we nail it. That's pretty much how that's done if you're just curious of how. But if you want to learn exactly what it looks like when it comes to digitizing, the properties, density and all that, then stay tuned. And if you like all things embroidery, consider liking the video and subscribing. Very much appreciate it. Now let's get into Hatch 2. Just to bring up what we're dealing with in case I haven't made my point of what it's supposed to look like this curve here. It has a bit of an angle, bit of a ramp. It goes high up and then kind of tapers off, and you can tell here in the middle satin as well, it's lifted on this side and then tapers off over here. So the red one was the one that was more successful. I ran the blue one exactly the same property wise, digitizing wise, but I put the 2 sheets of foam. And what ended up happening was that since the foam was so elevated, when it came around to do the satin that goes on top without the puff, I guess it wasn't reaching all the way to the other end where it was supposed to go over the 3D puff, that it just kind of started stitching on the 3D puff, which is what happened up here. So let's go through the properties now, and what I'm gonna end up doing is the same thing that I did before. I'm gonna do the same, and I'm gonna do one with double puff. Just make sure that it comes out the way that it's supposed to this time, and we'll see which one comes out with the best outcome. So let's start with this. Let's start off with a font that's already here in Hatch 2. I think this one was Woodstock. Yeah, it was Woodstock, about this high. And to make sure that there was space inside the satin, I broke it apart so that I was able to make these much wider, like this, giving me more space to add that thinner 3D satin inside. And we're gonna go off by this one, not the one that I previously did, just to show, you know, actually start to finish how we're doing this. So this, let's go ahead and stretch out these 2 nodes just like that. Okay, and now let's go ahead and delete this just to have this area over here much cleaner. So now let's go ahead and digitize a closed shape. So I'm going to do it the same as I had the other one. So a thin satin right over here, close to the edge, but not that close that I get that nastiness like I did on this one. Something like this. We'll end it with a point. And there we go. Let's go ahead and change that to a satin. Now the good thing about this, you don't have to be so careful about the properties of the one inside, because it's already going to be covered by thread when it's doing that puff, and then on top of that there's going to be another layer of thread on top of it. So worrying about foam sticking out is not something that's so important in this technique, which is a good thing. So we have that. Now we're still going to put up the density. Usually I put this, when you're talking about in inches, in 0.008. I could do that, there'd be nothing wrong with it, but I'm just going to keep it at 0.010 and probably use a different color foam just so you guys can see how that looks like. With the properties, remove it all just like that. So that's fine however that is. And then let's go here, digitize closed shape. Now for this satin, let's go ahead and unite it with the bottom one. Just add this, stitch angles as always. Nonetheless, you want the foam to stay in there, so you do want to fix that. Make sure that foam is just not going to be popping out of everywhere because of the stitch angles, anything else like that. Let's go ahead and bump up the density a bit. And you know what, this still looks too thin. Let's make it a little bit thicker here in the wider part of the satin just to make sure it's more obvious, like that. Maybe here as well. Okay, now that we can see that that's there, let's highlight it, change the color just so when we have it in the machine we could add a stop to it, remove the foam after it does this black, and then do the rest. Let's move that to the top. And then for the properties on top, I like to leave an edge run, take off anything else, just the edge run should be good, and that'll pretty much give us what we got with the red one. Now to do our next two samples, what I'm gonna do is, the other one that I did before was 1.7. I'm gonna make this 2.5 in height, just making everything much wider, all the satins, and make sure that we actually get a little bit more of that effect. I'm gonna scoot this over just a little bit, too close to the edge. So 2.5, and then I'm gonna copy and paste this one. Now this one, for the second one, I'm gonna be doing double 3D puff. So when it comes to the puff inside, I wanna scoot this even more to make sure I'm not gonna have that issue again. So I'm gonna make sure that it's well away from the edge. Let me bring this to the front just so you can see a little better. Now here I'm gonna change this angle just so it closes off this corner a little better. Again, it's not something that I'm too worried about, but I'll go ahead and do that anyway. So let's move everything away from that edge just a little bit more. Alright, that should be pretty good. Let's move this back up. Just gonna change the color of everything for the second one, just so it's easier to work with the thread colors, the stops and all that when it's on the machine. Only thing I forgot to mention is the density from the satin that's gonna go on top, the one that does not have any foam. I am gonna crank it up a little bit. It doesn't have to be that extreme. Again, you have double coverage for that foam, so you shouldn't have any issues with foam sticking out or anything like that. I'm gonna do it on some of this black stabilizer using my tubular hoop here because I can't find my 5x5 mighty hoop. So this will do for our test run. Just have to make sure I cut this big enough that I could fold it, so I have two sheets of backing holding up my design. I'm gonna do these two tees, one with navy blue and the other one in orange, just to show that it should still hide a different colored puff. So I'll be using this black for the little puff inside. I ended up changing the order of the way that it's gonna stitch out so that I'm able to just put one puff for the tee. It's gonna go to the other puff, add the second layer of puff. Once I rip that out, it could go back to do the top stitching for both letters, one after another. So we'll start off with the trace right here. Alright, I brought down the brightness of the camera. Hopefully it makes it a little bit easier to see what's happening under the light over here. Let's fit that in there. I cut off a bit of the corners so it could sit in there a little better. I'm feeling pretty stingy. I don't want to rip off another big piece of foam, so I'm going to be adding this one. If anything, this one is slightly squishier, like not so firm as the black one, but nonetheless you'll see it gives it way more height. My thread got stuck on the spool, the bottom of the spool. That's why you stop. Just gotta get that unstuck and continue. I'm gonna go back to the beginning when the thread got stuck on the spool. It didn't embroider that part. Find that. Alright, that's good. Not sure why it went back to the original angle. I had changed this angle to the corner so it would cut off the foam, but it didn't come out that way, so might have a bit of an issue there with the foam. I might have to cut this. Let's see if this works. There you go. So now I could just stick it in there right now in a bit. Same with this one here. So as you can see, this one is 3D puff. And then this one's the regular one. This one is much higher. I'm just gonna pass the lighter over a little bit, burn some of that foam in and the thread on the edges. So for the second one, I really need that second satin to really stretch far enough over here so where it doesn't do that edge run or embroider on top of that tall 3D puff. That's what happened on the first one. It might happen again. Only one way to find out. Is looking nice. Everything stitched up perfectly. Now let's go on to the super puff tee. Yeah, let's turn the machine off because I think we did it. Not perfect, for sure, but definitely got what I wanted. Now let's talk about what worked and what didn't. Clearly, the one with double 3D puff has that effect showing way more. This one looks clean, but compared to this one, it almost looks like it doesn't have that effect. And when you're looking at this one, that curve looks really nice, really raised. This one looks more like a little pyramid, not so much like a ramp, because I did put it much further away from this edge, so it ended up being pretty much in the middle. Still pretty cool. When the light hits it, you could tell it has that skinny top, and pretty much the same with the bottom thing happened. And then obviously right here, I think that little curve that I did that wraps around here was a little bit too extreme for how the top just kind of tapers off, so it ended up popping out through there. So if I were to do this exact same thing again, I would just end the bottom 3D puff stitch right here without having that curl at the end. The other thing I'm noticing that might also be affecting how good it looks or not is that we're embroidering on something that's very flexible, and I feel like that does have something to do with if it actually looks like what we're trying to achieve or if it doesn't. So I'm thinking we're turning the machine back on and I'm doing something on a hat. My son's initials are literally AAA, so I'm gonna do some kind of design with 2 flat A's in the back, just outlined, and then the 3D puff one in the middle on top. So no time to waste, let's get on it. I am gonna speed run the designing part of it, and then at the end I'll just go over the little details. It's gonna be the same thing as this stuff, but yeah, I just gotta get this thing started. Here's what I ended up with. I couldn't come up with the perfect design. I wanted it to be kind of like some little triangle with the A's, but I think this works just fine. I am literally gonna do white, black, and then that light blue on top for the 3D puff. As you can see, this is what is gonna lie underneath. Same thing we talked about. I am gonna do double 3D puff, so I'm making sure that it's got enough space away from the edge. These ends for sure are getting cut off, especially since the bottom of this satin is just wide open, so we don't want any puff sticking through there or causing any issues right there. So I'm gonna go ahead and hide the 3D puff. That's it. So let's go ahead and get it onto the hat already. I'm not gonna use any stabilizer. I think this should be fine. This is also a smaller hat, so I'm not doing the usual 2.5 in height that I usually go for designs. I think I did like 2.2 or 2.3, somewhere around there. I changed the colors because I was planning on putting white, black, but black's not really gonna show on this dark blue, so I did 3 different shades of blues. Let's get it. Alright, it is time to get foamy. Let's set this down right here. Alright, I hope that covers all the foam because this top part is smaller. The top foam is smaller than the bottom one. Was I trying to do this color? That is the wrong thread for... So right now it's doing light blue again. It's really supposed to be dark blue, but it doesn't matter. Once it does a second layer on top, it's going to be that dark blue anyway. Alright, now this is going to be interesting because it's really raised up, but it's also really thin. In the other examples, the bottom satin was much thicker than how this one here is. It's super raised, but it's really thin, and that top satin should be really wide as well. So we'll see how this one comes out. It is done, and man, I should have used the same color that I did the foam with for the top. Here it is. Ended up being a bit messy, but if I would have used, instead of that baby blue, if I would have used that dark blue for that puff, and this would have looked so nice. Nonetheless, I could just say I wanted it to look like that, so that's a double effect right there. But you can definitely see the raised effect all along the edges Right here we got that stitching sticking out because it was still too close to the edge. Overall, that 3D puff was too high and too close to the edge, and this is what we got. It was also gonna do this middle part again, so you see that running stitch over here and a little bit up here. I had to stop it. I must have copied and pasted it too many times. Here it is once again. I'm still calling this a success. Execution was halfway there. We still need to work on this a little bit, but I'm gonna say we got it. I hope you guys got a little of it as well. If you want to try it for the first time, or if you know more about this than I do, let me know in the comments, or any other suggestions you may have for myself and also for anybody else looking through the comments or looking to try this on their own. Appreciate you for sticking around. As always, feel free to drop the like and sub for your boy. It's getting pretty late for me. I think I'm gonna go eat and then knock out. That's it for me. Deuces.